That giant cacophony, ending in the Dominic Glynn version the Doctor Who theme tells you, it's the Power of Three podcast once again. I'm Kenny Smith, and today we're having a look at another Doctor Who novel from the past. Today, we're looking at Blue Box, which was the 58th novel in the BBC Past Doctor Adventures series. It was written by Kate Orman and released on the 3rd of March 2003 and featured the 6th Doctor and Perry. Interestingly, of course, been written by Kate Orman, who was synonymous with the New Adventures in 8th Doctor reign, so this was a bit of a first for her, having a PDA. But we'll come on to that later on. So what can we tell you about the cover? If you haven't seen it, it's got the usual Doctor Who logo. It's in the blue version rather than the faux metallic version, and it's majorly green, which is slightly strange considering it's called Blue Box. At the centre we can see said blue box with a light coming out of it, and there's lightning flashes going into it, but it's surrounded by what looks like green pulses in the way that those lovely covers from Black Sheep did in the early day. There's a spiral there, and you can see lots of ones and zeros coming out, pretty much binary stuff, and we can also see words there like information in reverse heading into this central blue box, and accessing, and yes, all heading in, but the use of typefaces is very interesting because they're very 80s. As we turn the book over, it tells us what lurks in the electronic labyrinth. A timely look at a vital issue of today. You will never look at a computer the same way. Freakfest. A dramatic true story of high-tech crime. The 1980s. As we enter the age of the personal computer, the newborn Internet spreads across America, and the computer invasion enters our homes. Across the technological frontier, an incredible war begins between the criminals and their savvy opponents. A brilliant young programmer, a beautiful college student, and a mysterious hacker known only as the Doctor join forces to combat an electronic threat fallen into the hands of a notorious computer outlaw. Respected computer journalist Charles Chick Peters was an eyewitness as these unlikely heroes fought their high-tech skirmishes across the nation's vulnerable capital and inside the world of the computer. Blue Box is a compelling true story of a secret computer project that could literally change the way you think. There you go. The book is also available now as an ebook and from the Amazon Kindle store, and BBC Books announced that a print-on-demand reprint of this novel would be made available as of the 30th September 2011 as the imprint revisited adventures featuring the first 8 Doctors. So if you want to get a copy in physical form, now you know how to. Before we go on, let's pause and have a reading from the book, and this is courtesy of our pal Dave Steele.
The sad story of Sarah Swan ends in a wheelchair somewhere in Virginia. I could start the story in any one of about a dozen places, but let's begin in a kids-themed restaurant on Rockville Pike, Maryland, 2 days before Christmas, 1981. Let's begin with a young lady we'll call Perry Smith, not her real name. The right word for Perry is petite. She's short and slender, with dark hair cut in a bob, deep brown eyes and a full mouth that curves into an impish smile. That night she was wearing jeans and a burgundy sweater. It's not the image that you get when you think of a computer criminal. The picture in your mind is some socially inept, groggy teenage boy, either bloated on Doritos or pale and skeletal like a forgotten potted plant. It was Perry's parents who gave her the wanderlust. A mating pair of archaeologists, her mother had divorced and remarried when Perry was 10. They took her with them from one continent to another throughout most of her teenage years. Staying still for her first year of college in a tidy dorm instead of a cheap hotel or a tent had felt like being set in concrete. She joined her stepfather in the Canary Islands for the summer vacation looking for a way out. When she met a migratory English hacker hippie who called himself the Doctor, she knew she'd found it. They had an unusual relationship, these two travellers. For one thing, he had never shown a flicker of interest in her. The Doctor was twice Perry's age at least, but he didn't act like a father or an uncle, more like a big brother with a bad case of sibling rivalry. They spent a lot of their time in half-hearted bickering, usually when one of them made some stupid mistake. He burnt dinner, she got lost, he couldn't steer, she got attacked by some animal. This time, it was the Doctor's turn to screw up. They were supposed to be visiting her family, but the Doctor had got them there at the wrong time, messing up her reunion plans. So now she sat in a booth, looking at a cartoon pizza menu and picking over the contents of her plate. It seemed a little weird to be surrounded by familiar language, money and food. A little creepy even, reminding her of those long months dragging around at college. They'd had a fight about it, like always. Now the Doctor was off sulking, sitting in another booth and bugging some waiter who had more important things to do than talk to him. She glanced over. The lanky, bald-headed waiter had actually sat down at the table with him. Usually, the Doctor dressed like a cross between a flower child and a character out of Dickens. For this trip, to stop her father panicking, she'd insisted he wear something more normal. He'd come up with a tailored black suit and a multicoloured tie. His curly yellow hair still stood out a mile. The next time Perry looked up from her salad, he was gone. So was the waiter he'd been talking to. Perry shrugged and stabbed her fork into a lettuce leaf. He'd get over it eventually. And then they'd get out of this dump and go somewhere interesting. After half an hour, with her plate long empty and the ice cubes in her Coke melted, she decided she'd better go and look for him. She wandered around the restaurant, dodging uniformed waiters and shrieking kids. There was a big video game section, and against one wall, 4 robot dogs jerkily mimed to the Beatles. She hoped the Doctor hadn't brought her here because he thought she would like it. Perry played a couple of games of Centipede and went back to the booth. It was empty. The dregs of her snack had been removed, and the table wiped. Where was he? Perry hovered on the sidewalk, trying to pick the Doctor out of the last-minute Christmas crowds running in and out of the cluster of stores bordering the parking lot. She slumped back into the booth inside, clutching her handbag. Wouldn't this be just the perfect opportunity for him to dump her so close to home? A theatrical exit like this would be just his style. But on the other hand, what if someone had grabbed him? He was always getting thrown into jail for one thing or another. What if whoever had got him was waiting to get her too? She had the restaurant call a taxi and dashed into it the moment it appeared. She had plenty of cash and a couple of credit cards the Doctor had given her. She told the driver to take her to the first hotel she could think of, the Marriott in Bethsaida. She'd been there once for an aunt's wedding. The hotel's tourist shop was still open, so she bought some toiletries and an oversized t-shirt that said Washington DC to wear as a night shirt. She took a long shower and collapsed into bed, going over her options in her mind. She could have gone back to their boat, maybe left a message for the Doctor, but she didn't want to lead any bad guys there, and what was worse, she realised she didn't even have a key. What about leaving a message at the themed restaurant? Same problem. What was she supposed to do? She wasn't sure where in the world her parents were right now. Could she keep on travelling by herself until she was ready to go back to college? Were the Doctor's credit cards real, or were they fakes? How long would they last? Where was he? Was he okay? Would she ever see him again? She dozed off around midnight, held tight between clean sheets, exhausted by worry.
Thank you so much for that, Dave. Now, it's time to catch up with the author, Kate Orman. When we spoke, it was 8 a.m. for me here in the UK, and for her it was 7 p.m. in Australia. So, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome back the brilliant Kate Orman.
Hello, I'm Kate Orman. Blue Box is the only past Doctor adventure that I wrote. And I wrote loads of other 8th Doctor adventures and Virgin New adventures.
I remember at the time, Kate, that this was a bit of a surprise learning that you were doing a PDA and it wasn't 7th Doctor, it was the 6th. So how did it all come about?
I think it must have been about the same time that the Sabbath arc was starting in the 8th Doctor adventures. Because I can remember thinking, what am I going to do with this character? I can't get a grip on Sabbath. I don't know what to do. And I thought, well, maybe I'll let everybody else have a go. And I've wanted to write a PDA forever, but I haven't really seen the opportunity turn up. So maybe this is the time. So I thought I'll just take a little holiday from 8th Doctor adventures while all that's happening. And, I've written so much 7th Doctor. The 6th is one of my favourites, so why not give him a whirl? And they must have fitted into the schedule as well. So Yeah, I think that's what it was. It's this, I've just reread it, and it's this bizarre failed experiment. It's a lot of fun, especially if you happen to be around Washington, D.C. in about 1982, because you're going to recognize a lot of the place names and things, and stuff that's going on. John and I were both there. I lived in the States for a couple of years, from the middle of 1980 to the middle of 1982. And John grew up about 40 minutes drive from where I was living, which is a bizarre coincidence, but it means we have this great overlap in things that we remember. And so he had a lot of input into the book, just in saying, do you remember this? Why don't you include this? He made a visit while I was writing it. He went to the States while I stayed here, and he filmed things and said, don't you put this in? So that was a lot of fun, all that nostalgia, and the nostalgia for old computers, the nostalgia for video games. The explanation of how the Apple IIe works was written by John, I think. And so there's that aspect of it. And also I had been reading a lot, and I mean a lot. There's a big box of them in the other room. Books by journalists who had kind of embedded themselves with computer hackers and people who were doing phone phreaking, using phones to manipulate the phone system to get free calls or to trick people to do various things. And early computer hackers, things are very sophisticated now and not done on a kind of a national level. Back then it was just little things, people sneaking into systems to have a peek around and, basically harmlessly. The scale of the crime was fairly minor. So it was much more to do with curiosity and cleverness, figuring out the way to manipulate the systems. I was absolutely fascinated by that. I was hypnotized by Cliff Stoll's book, The Cuckoo's Egg, which is about a professor who catches a hacker who's been sneaking into the systems at the university. And I was absolutely riveted by that. And I read several more books in the same sort of vein where they where the writer, the journalist, is telling you from their point of view who they met, what they did. And I thought, I want to do one of these. I would love to do something like this. And so that was what I did for a Sixth Doctor book. The only point is, problem with this is, not as good as the journalists who were writing the books that I was reading at what they were doing. So there's too much of me telling the reader the clever thing that somebody has just done to disguise where they're making a phone call from or something like that. There's a bit too much of it. There's a bit too much detail in that. And see, now I would be absolutely riveted by that if I was reading one of these books about hackers. But I'm not sure that everyone on this earth would find it as interesting as I did. So it's another example of your research showing, I suspect. But I know I had a lot of difficulty writing it. I didn't do enough work to plan it out before I started. There's a bit of flailing around at the beginning that happens, which was very visible to me. And I'm being very negative about it. I really like my Sixth Doctor. I should have put more of him in, actually. I don't think he gets enough as a look in. I just really enjoyed that. I thought, good. There's something I've got right anyway. So
I mean, I like the fact that as a former journalist, I always like to read people's journalistic creations. And here we have Chick Peters, who's an Australian living and working in the States, which is, I cannot think where you get the inspiration for that from at all, Kate. And but it's just the whole setup. It feels, I mean, obviously, of course, these days we've got the Stranger Things nostalgia for that period, and to me, looking at it now, it sort of gives me that kind of similar vibe, but a little bit more grown up, of course. But it has that sort of 80s retro thing. But the more scary thing is that I realised that sort of the period between when you wrote this in the 80s is pretty much the time difference between now and when you wrote this book.
Oh God. Oh, I hate comparisons like that. Oh my God.
Sorry.
John is always telling me, do you realise that X is 25 years ago this week or something? And I'm always like, oh my God, I'm so old. That's amazing. That's amazing to think about. It's like when they tore down the old shopping centre near our place 10 years ago. That place is still there in my mind. I went there so often. There's just a map of it in my head, and it's as though that really does still exist. It's only if I actually try to go there that I discover that it doesn't. And the 80s, the 1982 or whatever, that's kind of still there, as though I could walk out of one room and into that time. Very strange feeling.
So I was working with Justin Richards as your editor, because obviously you'd had Steve Cole previously on BBC Books.
I think absolutely fine. I don't think, I think he let me just get on with it, which is most kind. confidence enhancing. And then he would come in with intelligent notes at the end. But I think he'd just let me get away with things, so.
I like the way that you got to give the Sixth Doctor the outfit that Colin Baker wanted. And I'll quote here, he'd come up with a tailored black suit and a multicoloured tie. His curly yellow hair still stood out a mile. And that's so easy to visualise, sort of giving him that 80s suit, but doctorised. You can imagine perhaps a question mark, some subtle embroidery on the lapel, but this bright tie, and it's so easy to visualise Colin like that.
Yeah, it's one of the first things I thought of was you might be able to get away with that clown outfit in space, but you're not going to be able to do it in Washington, D.C. Yeah, and I knew that Colin had suggested a black outfit. I also gave him garish socks, I think, which I was quite pleased with. So the idea was to follow Colin's idea and make it a bit outlandish in that sort of classic Doctor way. Sylvester said of his costume, that's the sort of thing that you don't really look at twice. But if you did look twice, you'd see that it's actually quite odd. So it needed to be something like that.
Yeah. How did you find writing for the Sixth Doctor and Perry, obviously having been a fan of them for so long, and here you are getting to give them an official adventure?
I know, what a pleasure. I was pleased in particular to be able to write for Perry, who often wasn't served very well on screen, sadly. Try and make her a little bit more of a three-dimensional character and useful. One aspect of not having, particularly at the start, the Sixth Doctor is not involved as much. So Perry has to kind of figure out what to do and do it. And, we see that even though she's a very young character, she's had a lot of adventures by this point. So, she can kind of grab control and go ahead. And I liked giving her that. That was good.
And you even made her smoke at one point as well. Naughty Kate.
Oh, she does, doesn't she? Gosh. I wouldn't do that now, gosh.
Absolutely.
But I think that was the other thing that kind of played into this novel, was that I was sort of thinking my characters tend to be, like all of my supporting cast, they tend to be a bit naive, a bit nice, a bit correct. And I thought to myself, well, this is why Chick, for example, talks about drinking and eating meat and smoking and womanizing and all of this kind of thing. Because I thought, well, okay, I'm going to go completely the other way and have, likable major characters that are not so correct or nice or whatever. So I think probably Perry, I think she has a quick puff on somebody's cigarette, doesn't she?
That's it, yeah.
That's pretty, yeah, I wouldn't do that now, you see. But I must have thought that was very bold at the time.
You mentioned there the supporting cast. There's some fantastic characters. As you mentioned, there's Chick Peters as journalist, Bob Salmon, somebody who's previously met the Doctor and would like to or wanted to have an adventure, but now he'd say no because he wants to see what's happening with this computer online network revelation. And of course, Sarah Swan as well.
Yeah. I think poor Bob Salmon got to have all of the nice, correct naivety. He's clearly just a kid. I think Sarah Swan probably was inspired by some of the less pleasant people in those books about hackers that I read. The sort of the characters, if you will, the people written about by the journalists are a bit of a mixed bunch. They're all smart, they're often cunning, and some of them will hold a grudge and they know terrible things they can do to your phone line, for example. So they would get into a little war with each other, and I thought, okay, yeah. But I think that Sarah Swan is probably more malicious than even the worst of the people that I read about back in the day. She's sort of completely negative and completely, even ruthless isn't quite the right word, just absolutely hostile.
Spiteful, almost in places, the fact she'd go in and mess up
Spiteful,
somebody
yeah.
because she'd go in and mess up their credit rating just because they'd annoyed her. Yeah. That sort of person.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, she's a nasty one, but that makes her more memorable. So we've got the Eridani, as we discover, are the aliens who are on Earth, and they are I'm trying to sort of to uber simplify it, rewiring effectively human brains to carry out programming for them. Great idea, these. So any idea where that came from? Or is it just one of those, take it to the next level, you'd use whatever resources you have available?
I think as I'm sort of trying to make this novel work, kind of blossom, I'm sort of working away in the beginning. I'm establishing everything, but it feels to me as I reread it, and I don't remember very clearly, but that I don't quite know where I'm going. I don't quite know what the villain wants, and I don't quite know what the danger is. That I've got notes for this, but I haven't fleshed it out. And it's part of it as I'm rewriting the beginning a lot to try to make it work, and I haven't maybe focused on the later part. So my thinking is that I get to the idea of this is going to be a spoiler. I get to the idea of the little creature, the alien, that understands computers, that can program computers. And for that idea of some sort of biological thing that, drives with computers, that the next step is, you go in the other direction, and you can reprogram people. So you don't have a biological creature that's brilliant at computers. What you have is a computer that's brilliant at biological creatures, if you like. So I think that's probably how that idea developed. And it really starts to take off after about, I think, halfway. And it becomes, as the danger becomes clearer, and we go well beyond just people messing around on computers, tricking each other and trying to get each other into trouble. Things become deadly serious.
Yeah, I think it's definitely the stakes are rising. You can definitely feel that as it goes on, and Sarah Swan's plans are developing. As she is a nasty piece of work. It's definitely fair to say.
It's a bit shocking, actually. I don't think I even gave her one sympathetic scene. So
I was picturing her effectively as Sharon Stone, sort of giving it. Sharon Stone is now. I was seeing her as that kind of. Just that was how I saw her in my mind's eye. I don't know why. That's just how I read her. So
attached her.
I think it's always incredible how people interpret other people's work and who they would cast in these roles. Of course, this is a very different style. You're writing in the first person. How did you find that compared to the normal third person prose that you've been doing previously?
I actually enjoyed that a lot. Chick has this. I'm not quite sure why I made Chick an Australian living in the United States, unless it was so that I could get away with any mistakes in the English. There's a scene about whether it's the hood of the car or the bonnet of the car, this sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Or was it because, I was an Australian living in the States, and so I would take that perspective on it? I'm not sure. I don't know that it's developed terribly well in the story. But I've really enjoyed writing in Chick's voice and kind of taking that. A lot of the books that I read, you would kind of written in this slightly cool dude voice, which I really enjoyed. Cool guy explaining things to you, showing you something impressive. So yeah, I enjoyed that a lot, and it was actually a lot of fun to not write in. What's the expression for when you have it's third person, but you can do it from different people's points of view? It's third person limited or something. And anyway, whatever it's called, that was what I had always done. So to switch to first person was a huge jump, but it felt very natural.
Mm-hmm. The thing that I noticed when rereading was that, again, going for the time thing, this is almost a contemporary story for the Doctor and Perry, given that this was in sort of 1985-ish. And I think it does feel authentic. The fact that Perry's back, places she recognises. I laughed at the reference to grape soda and also at the reference to Foster's. So, Kate, as an Australian, do you guys like Foster's lager?
I drink so seldom, but I can't give you an opinion.
But speaking on behalf of the people of Australia, is it as popular as we're led to believe?
I think it must be. Or they wouldn't be the cliche. But I don't know personally.
Yeah. Some people couldn't give a Castlemaine 4X for anything else, though. So, brilliant advertising campaign that we had here in the 80s that we did very well. How did you find doing sort of this period setting? I mean, you mentioned, having done the research, read other books, because obviously computer hacking has gone on to a different level, particularly in the last few years, with cryptocurrencies being wanted in return for releasing websites and personal data. And it felt, reading it now, it felt as relevant now as it did then, if not more so.
It's intriguing because the stakes are so tiny when people are beginning to mess around with computer systems in the early 80s. And it really is, I mean, you can seriously mess up somebody's life by screwing around in computers. There was a notorious case of hacking where somebody blundered their way into the software for a machine for putting radiation into tumors. And I don't think anybody was harmed, but the potential for terrible damage was there. And so there was some of it that was quite serious. But on the whole, it was just people mucking around and showing off to one another. It's not like now where you have a team of paid hackers who have a specific job of wrecking the British Library or something as a kind of national sport, if you like. If there's not the sort of cyber terrorism or the cyber war, it's more just random people doing silly things. So that kind of innocence is a lot of fun to play with, really. Although again, it's the problem for the beginning of the novel because the stakes are low there. It's not until later on where they start to go up exponentially.
But just look at where we are now. Ransoms, effectively companies being held to ransom, which is quite a terrifying leap from, as you say, the innocent stuff happening in the 80s to what we have now.
It parallels the explosion during my lifetime of computers, where every home's got multiple computers now. Everything is done on the internet. Back in the day, the internet was around, but it hadn't taken off the way that it would in the 90s. And not every, most people didn't have access to it. So people were using bulletin boards or they were using the phone system or whatever. But so it was, it blew up from this thing that hardly anybody knew about. And this is one of the great things about being a hacker or a phone freak, because you knew this stuff, almost nobody else did. And then in the 90s, everybody starts to use the internet. I can remember downloading pictures of Paul McGann in 1996. I had to wait and wait and wait for those pictures, but I was patient. And now, of course, it's every aspect of our lives. It's there. It's certainly no longer a playground for a handful of self-made experts. So the potential for harm is immense by comparison. I think if the Eridani arrived now, they'd probably run away.
I think there's a line in the book when I think it's Bob who says to his dad that there's the potential with this hacking going for this to spread to tens of thousands of computers over the next 10 years. Brilliant. How I laughed at that.
That was wonderful. That was so funny. And there's another bit where they realized that an evil program is downloading, but it's only downloading at like 300 baud, so they have mere days to stop it. That was so much fun, that kind of thing. It's wonderful that the internet's been around so long that you can be nostalgic about stuff like, Usenet, where we all used to go and regards Doctor Who and have flame wars and things. It's a different world now.
Definitely. Now, Kate, I put it to you that there's a bit of bait and switch with the title of this book, because with See Blue Box, we're automatically thinking the TARDIS, and it doesn't even appear here.
Does it not?
No TARDIS.
You're quite right. What a smarty boots I am. The Blue Box is a famous phone freaking device which lets you manipulate the phone, I think, to get free long distance calls. So it had to be called that. But I might have involved the TARDIS. Maybe I could have had the Doctor using the TARDIS to get a free long distance phone call.
Checking in with the Brigadier.
That's quite funny that it doesn't actually appear. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well, then I suppose technically he'd have retired by now, wouldn't it? Be Colonel Crichton. So if we go with Modern Undead as being 1977, so.
Oh my God. That's a complex calculation.
Oh God, we're talking continuity.
Oh, help.
But I thought it was a really neat switch, because I remember thinking, what on earth is going on? And as you say, it's a very different kind of Blue Box. Something else is that this book really builds on that renaissance that was given to the Sixth Doctor and Perry, given their spiky relationship on TV. And obviously we've seen people like Gary Russell and Craig Hinton softening things in the book, and of course Big Finish as well. So it's really nice to see that fitting in, particularly when there's some conversations about Perry and why she stays travelling with this Doctor.
That's so important. I can't think who said in what interview that you, watching the Doctor and Perry at first, you think, why do they stay together? These people don't like each other at all. And then at the beginning of season 23, we're sort of beginning to get the signs of a reconciliation. They've worked through this stuff. They're not going to bicker all the time anymore, which is great, because became a bit of a bore. So yeah, you got Perry more in that state of, if she gets along with the Doctor, she laughs at his foibles, and she trusts him. But I think in this book she's pondering whether to jump off, because this would actually be a fairly logical place for her to do that. But she obviously does well enough during this adventure that she decides to stay. And I think it must be partly because she's fairly effective. It's not all just the Doctor with Perry clopping after him in her high heels. She gets to do stuff herself. So it's good. Yeah, I really like that, the development in the characters.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Penny in particular, people forget she's a student. She's studying botany. She's not daft. She's not just a very attractive young lady. She is actually properly smart. And it's great to see that was picked up on, whereas the TV series just generally tended to forget it and use her as a cipher for the usual, what is it, what's happening, oh, these corridors all look the same, etc.
Yeah, that happens to so many companions where they've been introduced as smart or brave or whatever, and then they'd be very quickly thrust back into that role.
Yeah, character development or retro.
Yeah.
So they're devolving
that's right.
rather than developing. Yeah. So, yeah. Of course, we get the revelation that Chick was actually born female, and this leads to some very strong language later in the book.
I nearly fell off my chair at some of the strong language, I have to say. There's a number of things in that book I wouldn't do again, although I wouldn't do now, and some of that was an example. But again, it's me trying to break free of that niceness curse.
Yeah. But it is authentic to the period, that's the thing. But sensitivities, I think, have changed a bit since.
Yeah, I hope that's, if people read it now, I hope that's what they have in their mind, is that, well, it was 1994, 1995. But the publisher let me get away with it. So yeah, again, I don't know whether that would happen now, but
yeah,
it was quite a shock to discover.
Mm-hmm. So how was it revisiting it again after all these years? Was it overall, would you say, was it one you enjoyed, surprised in a few places? And you did mention at the top a few surprises for you along the way that you weren't quite expecting.
Yeah, it's I was fascinated to reread it. I think more than loving it or hating it, I was very, very interested to look at it from the point of view of a writer, because I've now got the distance to be able to see it with kind of fresh eyes, which is so valuable for a writer, and see myself working on it. I see the problems that I'm having and the solutions that I'm coming up with, the bits that are working and that are generating story and generating character, and the bits that aren't working, and the parts where an idea begins to kick in and really function. If I looked at it with a very professional eye, I suppose you could say, rather than a Doctor Who fan eye, which is a bit of a strange way to read a Doctor Who book. You should just be relaxing and enjoying it. But I found it really interesting. And I'm sure that people will let you know what they thought of it whenever they happen to have read it. And I'd be very interested to find out.
And of course, it was reissued and made available as an ebook back in, I think it was about 2013.
That's right. We've only got 3 Doctor Who books that are still published, if you like. They're still available as ebooks. We've only got 3 Doctor Who books that are actually in print right now. You can get it as a paperback, or you can get it in electronic format, which is Blue Box, Seeing Eye, and The Year of Intelligent Tigers. And it was just kind of random that those happened to be the ones that Random House, I think, had the rights to. But I'm very glad that they're still available. So, there's the other ones are difficult to find, especially if you're not well heeled. But I'm glad that some of them are still out there for people who want to take a look.
Of course, this was your last Doctor Who fiction for a number of years, but of course, you've made a bit of a comeback more recently with Big Finish audio novels.
Yes. Oh my God, I have had so much fun writing them. The second Doctor in The Dead Star, and the third Doctor in The Mirror Matter. I had such a blast. It was somewhat like going back in time to the New Adventures, etc. It was such a familiar thing to be doing. But the format's different, the requirements are a bit different. So, I couldn't just throw things onto the page. I had to be a bit more mindful of not giving the characters long, complicated speeches, for example, which are going to destroy some poor actor in the studio. Technical things like that. So, gee, they were fun. I'm really hoping that I get to do another one.
Well, when we spoke for Vortex, you did say you'd quite like to do a Sixth Doctor one next, so having just talked about Blue Box, I'm sure that's probably got you, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, oh, that would be fantastic.
Dear David Richardson, thank you so much for taking the time to have reread the book and discuss it with us today. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Fantastic stuff. Thanks once again, Kate. Now, before we go on to have a look at the reviews, let's have a second reading from the book, again courtesy of our podcast pal, our regular co-conspirator, Dave Steele.
The Eridani, apparently, had retired to their spacecraft, which was lurking one of the Earth's Lagrange points. They were able to transmit and receive by hijacking communications satellites, hiding their own messages amidst the flood of traffic passing through. Supposedly then, the Doctor's conversation with his alien pals was travelling along a channel that started with a satellite at one end, meandered through the international phone system like breath through a tuba, and emerged from a speakerphone on my desk. Not exactly a close encounter. The Doctor seemed to have a lot of trouble getting the connection to work. There was that annoying delay you always get with satellite phone calls, supposedly made a lot worse by the Eridani being around 5 light seconds away, but there were also a bunch of whooping and shrieking noises. The Doctor listened patiently to these, like a blind freak listening to the phone system's language of clicks and clunks. Finally, the conversation got going. The Doctor brought the Eridani up to date. They seemed relieved that we knew where the missing component was, even if it was in Swan's hand, and they confirmed what we thought we'd seen in Swan's crude camera pictures. It was alive. The ideal way for their colony to make more of the machines, they said, was for at least part of it to be able to reproduce itself. The component forms a close bond with its user, said Ghislaine's voice through a background hiss of space static. Swarm won't harm it. She will have an instinctive sense of how best to take care of it. The Doctor was scribbling comments on a bit of paper for our benefit. Instinctive, ? He wrote, and underlined it a couple of times. He was impatiently doodling up and down the margin of the sheet while the stray cat lolled in his lap like the slut she was. Can I assume you will collect your property at the first available opportunity? He asked. A few moments of static, then... Breaking the bond might damage both the component and the organism to which it is bonded. It would be safer to wait for the component to mature. The Doctor sat forward. And precisely what happens when it reaches maturity? Do we have any alarming physical transformations to look forward to? Ghislaine seemed to be groping for the right terms. It is a nymph, not a larva. There is no metamorphosis, only the development of its nervous system will be complete. It will be ready to interface with the other components of the system. Bob cut in. Will it be sentient? Come to think of it, is it sentient now? Crackle. Hiss. Not in the sense that you understand the word. The Doctor pounced. And just what do you mean by that? Its nervous system is extremely specialised, said the Eridani. It is expert in certain tasks, but incapable of others. If we're going to contain this situation until it's safe to wean the creature away from its foster mother, I need to know precisely what it's capable of, said the Doctor. Without the other components, its abilities are limited, said Ghislaine. Its task is to analyse systems and adapt itself to them, or them to itself. The Doctor didn't like the sound of that at all. What do you... The voice cut him off. There is a further cause for concern. The component will have initiated its own gestatory process while still in ovo. It's partheniogenic, said the Doctor, as will be its offspring. Perry saw me looking lost. It's born pregnant, and its kids will be born pregnant. I guess they wanted to get their factory conveyor belt rolling, she added bitterly. The Doctor was saying, not only have you unleashed a mind-altering living computer on this bumbling little planet, but you've placed a miniature horde of them in the hands of a sociopath. He stabbed a finger at the speakerphone. You said the creature can adapt systems to itself. There's more to this than a clutch of baby components running about. That specialised creature can modify machines. Computers, heaven knows only what Swan might be able to do with it. Bob said, what does that mean? It can modify computers. Think of it as the ultimate programmer. It can acquire computer languages the way an infant acquires a human language. A native speaker of hexadecimal. Hacking a system, in either sense, would be as natural to it as playing with blocks. As natural to it as giving birth. Bob slowly said, do you mean it could make a copy of itself into a computer? A machine language of itself? That's precisely what I mean. It is true, admitted the Eridani's crackling voice. The human race is just entering a phase of its history in which it relies heavily on computers, the Doctor told the speakerphone. and you've introduced this spanner into those delicate works. The device will not operate without commands. Swan is right there to give it those commands, intuitively, remember? You're a ham-fisted contraption. All right, cut it out! The doctor swung round. Stray Cat leapt out of his lap and ran for the safety of the kitchen. Perry was standing with her fists planted firmly in her hips. "I can't believe I'm hearing this," she said. "You're both as bad as each other." "Perry, I'm in the middle of a very delicate negotiation," said the doctor. She emitted an exasperated hiss. "Listen to you, talking about that poor little thing in the tub as though it was a machine." "It is a machine," said the doctor. "Of sorts." "You wouldn't talk about some poor kid like that. You know, one of those autistic kids who's a mathematical genius. Whatever that little alien guy can do, it's still a living, breathing creature. It's got rights. I mean, for heaven's sakes, it's just a baby." The doctor's shoulders were progressively slumping in the blast. "It's not a stolen computer, it's a kidnapped kid. And you and those other guys have to get it back before it gets hurt or sick, or Swan makes it do something awful. And that goes for its babies too." "Perry," said the doctor, "we're not talking about a lost puppy. The component has the potential to wreck your civilization in a very short space of time. What's worse, it's affecting Swan's already unpleasant mind." He steepled his fingers. "It probably interferes with the brain's opiate receptors, like a particularly powerful addictive drug. You saw how desperate our friend Louis was to retrieve it. It makes them want to own it?" "That's right. For our lost idiot savant, it's become a survival mechanism. It needs to be sheltered and fed and supplied with technological toys."
Thanks again, Dave. And you can follow him over on the Earth 2 podcast. If you enjoyed his reading there, email the earth2podcast@gmail.com and Peter will pass it on to Dave, and Dave will probably get quite smug. So, let's have a look at the contemporary review from Doctor Who magazine at the time of publication, and this appeared in issue 330, where it was written by Matt Michael. This was accompanied by a piece of art from Roger Langridge, which shows the Sixth Doctor wearing his black suit with a pair of shades on, sitting at a computer with a badge saying "I love IBM," while Perry is leaning against his machine with a drink in let's call it a grape soda, drinking it with a straw and wearing a jumper and jeans. So, what does Matt have to say about it? Tron meets the Wasp Factory in Kate Orman's latest novel, the story of a crashed alien probe canalised by various dubious individuals, and the Doctor's attempts to return its components to the Eridani before they can be used to affect the future development of Earth. Unfortunately, one of the key components, an organic computer known as the Savant, has fallen into the hands of Sarah Swan, a computer expert with a power complex. As events unfold, it transpires that the Savant is more than just an innocent spare part, and that investigative journalist Chick Peters, from whose perspective most of the story is told, is far more than just an ordinary guy. Set in 1982, at the dawn of the internet age, Blue Box concerns itself with the birth of this world-changing technology. Packed full of computer freaks, that's with a PH, hackers and other geeks, it can be difficult for a technical ignoramus, such as this reviewer, to follow whole paragraphs. All that can be said is that Orman makes the technobabble sound realistic, regardless of whether it actually is or not. There's a sense that Orman feels Colin Baker was hard done by, and she's at pains to make her Sixth Doctor more whimsical and more typically doctorish than he usually was on TV. Note his determination not to allow the Eridani to terminate their Savant. She also has him shed his patchwork nightmare in favour of Baker's preferred plain black jacket, although she doesn't tone down his pompous, patronising manner. The Doctor, however, isn't really the focus of the book. He drifts through the novel, cleaning up the mess caused by the Eridani and Swan. Likewise, though Perry benefits from some nifty repair work, with Orman suggesting that there is much more to her relationship with the Doctor than merely the petty bickering, she isn't key to the story either. Even the Eridani appear only briefly. Instead, Orman chooses to concentrate on developing Swan and Peters, one a megalomaniac, the other a fairly wolfish journalist, both seeking to control their respective environment. A sense of distance and remoteness, both physical and emotional, runs through the book. The computer freaks tend to be loners connected to other people only by their modems. The Eridani are scattered through space, unable to travel beyond the speed of light. And the main characters are emotionally detached, caught up in their own obsessions. Friendless and paranoid, even before she comes to the mind-altering powers of the savant, Swan is apparently incapable of having an ordinary human relationship. She makes a superb villain, arrogant, vain, and completely cold. The ease of posing as someone else on the net raises questions of identity. At some stage in the plot, all the key characters pretend to be someone or something they are not. Worse, those affected by the Eridani lose their identities, overwhelmed by the savant's ability to alter the programming of the human brain. In turn, this leads to disturbing questions about reducing people to the status of machines, or raising machines to the level of humans. This is Cyberman territory, but feels more plausible. There's no catastrophic accident behind this dehumanising process, simply human greed and the desire to build ever faster processors. Blue Box is a very fine cyber thriller, told in Orman's usual fluent style, and in several distinct voices. The story is fast-moving and gripping, the characters are complex and believable, the language elegant and evocative. However, at times, the tone leaves the reader feeling as detached as the characters we read about. Perhaps it is because Swan is so coldly efficient that it becomes difficult to warm to the book. Possibly it's because there is a lingering sense that this is only a fragment of a story, a journalist's incomplete understanding of events. Only the Doctor can see the bigger picture, but we don't actually see much of the Doctor. This is a tale told from the point of view of the people whose lives the Doctor touches as he passes through. Maybe the book's real triumph is that it makes the seasoned Who fan see our hero from a different angle. It makes us feel like outsiders to our own series, and after 40 years, that's no mean achievement. So that's how they saw it in 2003. Goodness, this was at the start of the 40th anniversary year. So, how is Blue Box viewed in 2025? Well, on Goodreads it's got a rating of 3.42 from 154 ratings and 17 reviews. 5 stars 18%, 4 stars 27%, 3 stars 38%, 2 stars 11% and 1 star 5%. Let's have a look at some of those reviews. Let's kick off with a 5-star review from Edward Butler. What a brilliant name, Edward Butler. What a wonderful surprise this book was. It's a genuine grown-up novel in the Doctor Who universe. The portrayal of Perry's character, in particular, was extraordinarily sensitive. Best Who novel I've read, by a long way. Setting the novel back in the 1980s was an inspired choice as well. For one thing, it gives the author an opportunity for profound insights into the evolutionary arc of computer technology and the social transformations it would unleash. But it also acts as a subtle and rather sweet tribute to the era in which the Sixth Doctor debuted. Outstanding. Happy customer. Good. 5 stars also from Matthew Cressell. He says, reading Blue Box in December 2023 was an interesting experience. Published more than 20 years before I read it, it was set a further 2 decades in the past from that. A past Doctor adventure, then, in more ways than one. But an intriguing read, even for someone like myself, who wasn't a fan of the TV era that Kate Orman was tying into. In no small part, because this isn't your ordinary Sixth Doctor story, by any means. To tell her SF thriller, Orman chooses a different format, one quite different from the sort of techno-thriller the plot emulates. Blue Box isn't written like your standard Doctor Who novel at all, but instead as a faux non-fiction work. It's a format that has proven successful in the past with the likes of Who Killed Kennedy, so it comes as a surprise that this was only the second time I'd come across the format being employed. It also means that the novel is anchored by a sole narrator, who is sometimes recounting events and other times recreating them, this time in the form of writer Charles Chick Peters. Chick is an interesting eyewitness to events, potentially unreliable, as the changing of names and details sometimes alludes to. But it's through the subjective eyes of Chick writing their factual accounts years after the fact that details gradually appear, including their background, as readers pick up on the non-American terms being used before learning of Chick's background. Indeed, there's an 11th hour twist involving Chick that felt rather timely reading the novel in 2023, but which Orman handled well, or at least as well as possible, given the historic setting and the language used as a result of it. Like Who Killed Kennedy before it, Blue Box makes a good case for exploring the Doctor's adventures from a subjective and faux non-fiction viewpoint, something that one wishes more authors had taken advantage of. Even with the passage of 2 decades, it also remains an immensely readable Doctor Who techno-thriller, one that's less traditional Doctor Who than the likes of Justin Richards' 2 shock novels, but also improving upon a lesser TV era, recapturing the remaking of the Sixth Doctor's tenure in the early 2000s. The result? Dare I say it, Blue Box might be the best Sixth Doctor novel I've read to date. I think that's a bit of a win there. 3-star review from Ken. Set during the winter of 1981 and narrated through a computer journalist, Charles Chick Peters. This is a very tech-heavy story concerning computer hacking. One interesting aspect is that Orman decides to switch to the Sixth Doctor's black suit, something that Colin Baker wanted in the show. I found it enjoyable to a point. It held my attention, but the computer jargon was a little too much for me. Though some of the quips about the internet did amuse me, like the line about being able to order pizza. 3 stars from Daniel Kukwa. It moves along at a nice clip, especially in the second half. It wallows in some convincing early 80s techno-nostalgia for those of us old enough to remember that seemingly distant past. However, it's certainly not the best of Kate Orman's Doctor Who novel canon. She doesn't have the same love and affection for the 6th Doctor and Perry that she does for the 7th and 8th Doctor. Our adoration in those efforts positively glows on each and every page. In all honesty, the novel never really rises above being a pleasant diversion, almost as if she was going through the motions on this occasion. Vampire science and Year of Intelligent Tigers, it certainly isn't. Finally, 2 stars from Kristen. Kristen says, "Don't get me wrong, the book was good, but it just didn't have the Who feeling. Most probably because of the why aren't you renting a camper and hiding in the forest that the TARDIS would be a much better place to hide away moments." Thank you, Kristen. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please feel free to leave a review wherever you get your podcasts from. Feel free to follow us on social media at Power of 3 Pod on Twitter or at Finished Seed on Blue Sky. And don't forget, we have a Facebook page as well, and we'll be sharing the DWM illustration on there too. And so, dear listener, it's time to go once again. Now, I couldn't find any songs about a blue box, but I do remember a song from 1986, so almost the year this book's set, by Redbox, and this is Lean On Me. So, until next time, I've been Kenny Smith, and we'll see you very soon. Or hear you. Or you'll hear me. We'll get there one way or another. Bye-bye.
Are we happy?